Hello, friends. We're here at the Legal Line podcast. I'm Antree Damakos. I am the COO and founder of Legal Line and legalline.ca. And I'm here today with the chief of Smith Investigations, Whitney Smith. She's a private investigator. Yeah. And Marisa Cuter, who is the CEO and founder of Pardon Partners. And they remove criminal records so you can make a fresh start with your life. And we're going to talk a little bit today about employment situations and how all this stuff interacts, the legal, the PI stuff, and if you have a criminal record. Yeah. So let's start. An employer wants to hire an employee for, let's say, a fairly responsible mid to upper level job. Where would an investigation fit in? Why would we hire a private investigator?
Yeah, I mean, due diligence is very important, right? At the end of the day, that person's going to represent your brand. And let's say they are going to have 50 people, 100 people that are working under them. You want to make sure that there's a credible individual, somebody who's capable of that position. So, we want to look obviously into employment verification. Have they worked where they said they worked? Do they have a criminal record? Are there arrest records and maybe issues in their past? And, potentially there is, and maybe, the individuals in their 50s and something happened when they were 18 or 19, well, a pardon process might come in and, they might try and wash something away. But, ultimately, we want to look into a full scope of who an individual is. You might want to do surveillance and ultimately see, hey, does this person look credible?
How much surveillance can you do? Well, that's another question. Yeah. What's legal and what would be appropriate? Yeah. Because maybe you'll, piss them off, upset them.
For sure. Most of the point of just surveillance is discretion, right? So likely someone would never know that they were investigated. That would be the right intent, behind surveillance is you're in,
part
you're
of a background check.
Yeah, you're looking for an objective, right? So you might only be there for a day or two. If you're just looking to build some sort of character reference of what's this individual doing on their week to week? Did they say that they're working for somebody right now and they're not? Well, then that's a red flag.
Right.
What are you doing during the day?
Any inconsistencies.
Yeah. So you're trying to learn a little bit more about the person, and people don't always go surveillance first. That's typically not what they do, but I mean, it certainly can happen. Typically it's the background check. They want the employment verification. They want to know about family. A lot of people, that's a big thing nowadays, is
really, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can hire somebody and ultimately, they might fit with you, but what's their home like, right? They could have a very traumatic and disruptive home life, and then that stuff starts to come into people. So a lot of employers now,
into your
they
office,
want to know how many kids do you have, and then there's the concern legally of asking those things, but people want to know that information. It helps them to have, some background.
Well, legally, you're not supposed to base your decisions on hiring 100%. Someone based on whether they have a partner, based on whether they have children or any other personal information, unless it is something that impacts on the job. For example, they don't have the certification and the qualifications that are necessary for that job. They did not go to that school that they said, or they have a criminal record that they said they didn't have. And they have to have a clean record, no record to have this job. So you have to be careful on the legals as to 100%. What is appropriate and what isn't. But at some points, you will be justified.
Oh, absolutely. And we stick within what's ethical and what's professional.
Exactly.
And it depends on the situation, right? Somebody might, in an interview, divulge certain information, and then they just want to verify that, right? And maybe they're saying, I just recently went through divorce, and it's a little bit messy. And, people say things in interviews that's just them sharing that information. So, ultimately, an employer might want to just learn a little bit more and make sure that things line up in the way that it's stated.
Double check that it's true 100%. Rather than what it is. Yeah. So we're not going to discriminate against you if you're married or you're single. Yeah. But did you actually tell us the truth? And if you didn't, then that's a question of, your honesty. Yeah. And as an employee, we'd like you to be honest. Yeah. And how about if they have a criminal record? How do they check? They need to give you consent to check their criminal record.
Yeah. There's a myth that employers can check randomly, which is just not the case. They need formal written consent.
Do you usually get it from the individual, the potential employee, rather than a company asking you about criminal record checks?
I mean, criminal record checks became common practice in the mid-2000s, so I want to believe most people expect to have to submit a criminal record check, especially at a mid-level or high-level position. Whether they remember something that happened 15, 20 years ago.
Or want to talk about it.
It's usually a reactive instead of proactive process, unfortunately.
So do you have to help with support letters for people trying to get jobs? Because I'm assuming if they come to you and they have a criminal record, they either are going to get fired or they won't get hired. Is that just the end of it, or can you keep them employed, for example, while you deal with their criminal record?
That is the goal. So bigger companies are going to have stricter policies in place where there's not a lot of leeway. Mind you, if they're a great candidate and this is the only little hiccup,
from years ago, let's say something small.
Right.
Young and dumb.
It's not
Young and dumb. There you go.
exactly. And it's not related to the job. So this is a senior tech person and this is a drinking and driving offense from 25 years ago. Like, it's not going to affect his or her ability to perform.
So they might let it go for that.
And we would absolutely guide them through what would be relevant to share, if we can offer support in writing to show that the application's in process, provide them with supporting documents confirming what the offense is, then absolutely that's what we would want to do for them.
And how many, in terms of investigating individuals, so criminal record checks are pretty common now, and you have to give your consent. And in terms of being investigated and more of a general background check, what is the typical thing you look at for potential employees? What are you checking? Are you checking their driving history? Are you checking their credit record? Like, what are you checking?
More often than not, it's that education verification, right? Like, I could say, oh, I went to, Stanford for my university. And so did I actually?
It's so easy to do
then,
now, right?
I've worked at, resumes can be long, right? So, are people really looking? So do you have a gap in your resume and it doesn't really make sense? So you're filling it with something. So you're extending how long you work somewhere. You're maybe extending the, and especially with AI now, like, make me look better. All of a sudden you went from being a Tim Hortons employee to there's quite this extensive rap sheet of what you're capable of. So we're looking for the inconsistencies. We're looking to make sure the timelines match. We're looking to, if there's consent, reach out to those references and say, hey, what's the situation? Or am I calling, your best friend and your best friend's telling me everything about you? Meanwhile, you're answering the phone, ABC company, and it's not ABC company, right? And you don't
pausing the game.
Okay. 100%.
Okay, this is Whitney's friend.
Yeah.
Okay, shh.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big issue, right? There's a lot of people that lie.
A lot.
And it's unfortunate because sometimes they probably would be really great candidates for the position, but because they feel that they need to sell themselves higher.
They need to embellish. They
shoot
feel
themselves
that,
in the foot by just saying too much. And when we find those inconsistencies, that scares the employer. Because if you're willing in a resume to have inconsistencies and gaps and lies, what won't you do in the role that you're in, right? So all things that the employers want to see and understand about the individual beforehand.
It makes perfect sense. And today, I feel like there seems to be more of a leeway and more an acceptability for things to be virtual.
Yeah.
So I virtually work there. I didn't actually work there, but I feel like I work there because I read their website. Right. So so easy now with technology to make a certificate up and frame it very simply. Yep. So this is an interesting thing. I didn't know that resume checking was such a big.
It's all levels, and every client is different for the positions, for the situations. They might see something that just seems off, and they'll say, specifically look at this, or it's this whole encompassing thing. And when we're talking about people as people, you want to make sure that this person's going to fit in with your organization, right? Like you are bringing someone into an office and do they seem toxic? Are they going to bring in toxic type behavior? Are you going to then have employees fighting and angry and upset with each other? So you really need to understand as a character reference too, who is this person?
What do you find a lot of out and out frauds? I'll give you an example. When I was in law school, we had all of a sudden, after about 3 months of classes, this one kid disappears. It's like, what happened to Robert? I don't know. No one knows what happened to Robert. Well, Robert was a fake.
Right.
Robert had taken somebody else's LSAT scores and undergraduate scores, had used his name, and had applied to Western Law School. And the real Robert was out in BC somewhere going to law school. These guys did not even look at all alike. And all of a sudden, this fraud came to light. I'm not sure how that happened. And our Robert disappeared. Our redheaded Robert disappeared. So do you get a lot of out and out frauds now with resume checking?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely see things, especially you're seeing scams are so prevalent nowadays, right? People are lying about everything. It's easy for them to. They can create these complete personas online and they feel no guilt to it, really. That's the craziest thing. It's like there's this very strange dissociation where they just go from being
That's
who
prevalent
they
now.
are
Yeah.
to like online they can be anything they want. So then they're having this issue with that coming into a workplace.
How about now with the criminal record checks? That's going to be very specific because don't people have to submit their fingerprints, or is it just their name and date of birth? What kind of record checks are being done now by employers?
Depending on the nature of the employment.
Then, well, the nature of the level too. Like you can get as simple as a CRJMC, which is that criminal record judicial matters check. That's online same day. You're getting a result right away, but it's just saying negative or clear. Like that's not really helpful.
That's
in
not a
anything.
detailed check.
Yeah, so it depends on the level they
The
need.
police call that a level 1,
Yeah.
and it's known as a clearance letter. So you know it's going to come back clear. Whereas a judicial matters criminal record check will show convictions and including non-convictions.
And it gets much more intense if the position is has to do with vulnerable people. For example, if a children's organization wants to hire someone and they do a record check or a background check, they're going to try to uncover, and there is legislation backing that up, where you actually can get a deeper check and things that would normally be
vulnerable sector.
sealed for, let's say, my job at the Tim Hortons
Right.
versus dealing with vulnerable people.
Absolutely.
So you get a vulnerable sector check, right?
Right. And even if the record has been removed,
Like with a pardon, you mean?
or fingerprint destruction for non-convictions,
Right.
the under the Police Reform Act, they can disclose relevant type offenses, assault in nature, but under specific criteria. So absolutely in that family of offenses, assault, sexual assault, threats, if it's going to affect their job. Other criteria is the recency and whether there was a pattern. So honestly, I can't think of a past client that would fall into that situation. We are obviously aware because we need to be, but individuals who might have a pattern of that activity
Right.
are not seeking roles with the vulnerable sector.
Typically.
Well, hopefully not. But
Yeah.
I know that they do all these record checks, like Parks and Recs, for example. I had a friend who was a director there, and they put all the children's programs together for the summer. Funny thing is, they would submit all these checks into the police services, and they wouldn't get them back until October.
Oh, they take months.
So the whole summer program is finished.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if they are coming to a company like yours, coming to Whitney to say, Whitney, this isn't going to come back fast enough. Is there any way you can get any information? Because these are children and we don't want to expose them to anyone who can potentially be harmful to them.
Police specifically need that vulnerable sector. Like they need it to come, especially for insurance purposes. If something were to happen, and let's say you have some insurance that protects you, you have to have that police issued vulnerable sector check.
I know.
So that's not something that we could deal with.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you
It
could
needs to come
do
from that
an
police
investigation, but it's
Yeah.
not the one required by insurance.
Yeah, so it
of
depends.
course.
And that's why there's
Right.
different levels, right? And now we're seeing too where mental health issues are becoming more and more prevalent. So employers are calling and they'll say, we want a background check and we want their health information. You're like, well, we cannot give that. And, we had someone not too long ago who had called and, they wanted to do a background check on this potential employee who fit all the boxes in terms of being able to complete the job.
Right.
And the individual disclosed some mental health issues and anger issues and things like that. And they were willing to sort of bypass some, whatever, but they still called us and they wanted us to try and find what maybe mental health issues or what medications the individual's on. And we're saying, like, we can't do that. Like, that's like, even if we could get that information, like we wouldn't and we couldn't supply
Ethically,
that.
yeah.
And, so this individual, they ended up hiring the person and, everything seemed to be going fine. And then clearly whatever these triggers were this individual had, like started to really scare some of the people in the workplace.
So eventually it popped
eventually, the individual doesn't work there anymore because people felt literally in fear of their lives. So that's a challenge too of this, where there almost maybe needs to be some legislation that is adjusted because obviously we can't look in people's mental mental health records, but safety of other staff members and clients and customers
I
is
guess
very
with
important
consent.
too. If there was a consent kind of option.
And if someone's not willing to give that consent, then
and it is
a
what it
difficult
is.
question.
But I think that's something we probably have to look at legislatively in the coming years, because you're dealing more and more with people that maybe even it came from substance abuse use, drugs and things like that. It's affecting
prescription
people's brain.
or street, doesn't matter. It can
and
affect
they might
your
be
balance.
out of it, but it doesn't mean that there's no negative effects from it.
Right. And it seems to be this constant struggle between the individual's right to privacy and autonomy and the public, or in this case, the workplace safety.
Yeah.
So it's a constant struggle.
It's a slippery slope, because I fully respect somebody's privacy, and I think that everybody absolutely has the right to that. But then the employer on that side who's hiring somebody and they fit everything for the position, but they also might endanger people. And then that's quite scary, because then the employer's taking that risk, bringing somebody in and, potentially has an issue then with
they have
maybe
the liability,
somebody getting harmed. Yeah.
In addition to just the trauma of something happening to somebody you work with that you're responsible for, now you're also legally and financially responsible because you're the one who made this decision.
Exactly.
It's a very difficult place to be.
It's a tricky spot, right? And so, you understand where employers are feeling uncomfortable in some of the today's society, and that's why they're reaching out to private investigators and to anybody that they can that's an expert within the realm of them hiring and making
criminal
sure they're
records,
safe. Yeah.
What kind of behavior do they normally exhibit? Are they in debt? If you're hiring a CFO and they've committed a fraud, a big fraud, especially some crazy
breach of trust,
stuff. Fiduciary duty, all of that, breached it all. They've got this criminal record. They've got their own financial problems because possibly they did that for their gambling or addiction or something. And so you could both come into play trying to analyze that record, remove that record, find with consent, find their financial situation.
Or sometimes you don't even need financials. We had a client that owns a lot of rental properties, and they wanted to bring in somebody who's going to be a maintenance individual.
Right.
So,
like
they
a
reach
superintendent.
out. So they reach out. They want to just vet the individual because the person's going to live on site. So we'll get basically free rent in lieu of, and then of course they're still compensated for the position. But then they just started to kind of hear some things. They saw some things on social media on an individual's public profile that they thought were weird, and they just said, "Can you look into this?" Sure, no problem. So we do some social media investigations. Then we go through, arrest records and criminal history, and we find that just the previous year, the individual had been charged with fraud and stole up to I think it was 1.5 million, 1.6 million, something like that from a previous client. So, the guy's like, whew, right? Because then you're into Residential Tenancies Act, because now this individual would have lived on site. So now you would have, LTB issues. There would have just been quite the mess of the situation.
And they'd be so integrated into your world.
Well, they could, God forbid, that person could damage property, right? They could take a sledgehammer and go smacking things and breaking very expensive items, right? So, some people will call and they'll say, well, how much is a background check? And we'll say, well, they started $1,000, and they can go, oh my gosh, that's expensive. And it's like, how much is the opposite? Because we've seen people who didn't do the due diligence, and it's cost them thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to potentially get rid of somebody. So in the grand scheme of you're trying to hire somebody, it's probably going to cost an average of $20,000, give or take, to bring somebody in. Between your going out for your hiring costs, then you got to onboard them. You're maybe giving bonuses. You're maybe doing whatever. All the training, you're putting your a significant amount of money,
work,
everything,
your own time,
everything.
Just being around this person, or your loss in revenues and processes because they're trying to get up to speed. And in the meantime, there's all this stuff brewing back here. You wouldn't have even let them in the door if you knew about it.
Yeah.
And then there's some people that just made an honest mistake once in their life
100%.
And they need to start over.
Yeah. And I think that always comes to character too. When you sit in an interview with somebody, you can usually have that gut level feeling too, or, you can feel like, oh, this is a good individual, and I think this person would be good within my organization. Mm-hmm. And then you can get the ones where you're like, call your local private investigator right away and say something's funny, Help.
Help. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
And I have no reason to say no, and I don't want to get in trouble legally. So can you find me the real reason.
Yeah. Or sometimes people can be odd in interviews, right? They can feel a little nervous, so they can do things that could seem odd, but maybe that's not who they are. But that prompts a background check. That prompts a little bit of a deeper dive. I gotta, had something, but then the person works for them and everything works out great and life is happy. And, the organization's running smooth with that person and everything's going great, but you just want to know.
And then there's the situation where you have an employee and there's an accident. Mm-hmm. Some kind of an injury, and it happens, let's say, at the workplace,
right,
to keep this example easy. But are they really injured? Are they injured a little bit? All right, can they do their job? And then the waters get muddied as to what is going on there.
Yeah.
And that's a good opportunity for you. Mm-hmm. That's something you can investigate.
Absolutely.
What's the common way you investigate a workers' comp claim if the employer somehow gets suspicious that something's wrong? Because obviously, if it's very evident that someone broke their leg, mm-hmm, then we all know. Look, they're in a cast, they broke their leg, they're coming back in 6 weeks, for example. But then there's something might alert the employer that this claim might not be kosher. Mm-hmm. What happens?
So a big thing would be they're figuring it doesn't make sense, right? So maybe out of an entire building, this individual slips in the one section that doesn't have a camera. And what were they doing in that section? And they didn't need to be in that section. So you can start to see the inconsistencies first of like, well, what happened? And if they went to the doctor and then they're supplying a doctor's note and the doctor says, yeah, they can return back to work with, some limitations and restrictions, but then they're saying, absolutely, I can't. Well, that doesn't make sense. Your medical professional is telling you that you can. So, there's things like that. There's also situations where people work a job and then, we've had subjects that own landscaping companies. So they miraculously get injured right before the summer starts. And then they're on leave and they're on a claim all summer getting paid. And then they're working some sort of summer business or a fall business or something like that, right? So sometimes it's
maximize their income,
putting the personalities together. But again, it can be that social media side. Somebody sees a video of the guy saying, hey, I own ABC Lawn Company. And he's out, $50 for your grass to get cut, something like that. And someone sends it to the boss and the boss says, hold on, we need to do our due diligence here. So, typically we're going to go out and we tell clients minimum 3 days, should be 6, and they should be consecutive because with, slips and falls, with motor vehicle accidents, whatever those injuries might be, if you only go out and you do 1 day of surveillance, you could get the person as active as possible and you think you've got a slam dunk and they could go to a mediation and say, I was in bed for 5 days after that. I couldn't move.
Right.
I pushed myself beyond my limits and
now I'm in traction.
Now I'm stuck at home and I'm on the bed and my family has to take care of me. And, now I know I can't even come back to work now. And now the stress of knowing this investigations take place, well, now it's psychological problems. So you could really extend it and cause more issues. So we want to get in there.
That makes a lot of sense. You want to have some kind of a consistent profile on this person. Yeah. You don't want just a ad hoc 1 day here and 1 day next month. You need to kind of see what they're really up to and 100%. How they're really feeling.
Yeah, so we want to go in as soon as, if they suspect any fraud, we want to go in right away with surveillance. So again, that 3 to 6 days doing, usually a 12-hour day because we want to see a lights on, lights off approach of what are they doing throughout the day.
That makes sense too.
Absolutely, because they might not be active in the day and then at night they're out, partying or doing God knows whatever.
That's the time.
It is,
lights go down and dancing shoes come
Nobody's
on.
Yeah, well, especially, and it depends on the age of your subject. We had a guy who supposedly got injured in a factory setting, and he was a young guy, and we had done surveillance, and I literally was just sitting and finishing notes in my truck before I was leaving surveillance, and, it was later at night, but I was like, okay, before I get on the highway, I'm just going to, bust out some of these notes, so it's done. And around, 10:30 at night, the guy leaves, goes downtown Toronto to a nightclub.
And that's when they open at around 11. It's early. 11 is early now.
Which is crazy. I'm like, listen, that's bedtime. But, this is for some people. It depends on their lifestyle, right? So it's really understanding all those things and really being there as much as possible, because if you think that 7 to 3 is your best window, well, that might not work for somebody. You might need to be have 7 a full to 11 picture. And you're going to learn more.
You need the full picture.
Yep.
How many workers' comp frauds do you see? You must see quite a few of those as well. And so now the individual needs a job. They've already tried to defraud their employer by making a false claim. So with a workers' comp fraud, that's going to be a more serious offense.
People don't charge for it. Canada is
I
very
wonder.
passive.
I was going to say I've never heard of this.
So the
I wonder if
states-
it's
Really?
employment
States,
law.
you would get charged with
It's employment
fraud.
law, not
Yeah.
criminal.
So the employer does not call the police here.
No,
generally.
well, there's nothing they can do anyway. Like, it's at the end of the day, Canada should absolutely. That is fraud, hands down.
I mean, if you're submitting a form saying,
100%.
Give me a total of $400,000 over my lifetime of collecting these payments, that's a big fraud.
Yeah.
And I'm saying I have this injury and this illness that I do not have.
Yeah.
And that's verifiable by a physician.
Yeah.
How can they not be charged, right?
Canada is very passive when it comes to that. So I would say it's a countrywide issue. And it's just like this tone that Canada has taken where it's like, hey, don't do that, please. Hey, don't do that, please. Like, there's career claimants. In Ontario, we pay the highest insurance premiums of anywhere else in Canada
I'm
because
surprised
of the amount of
that,
fraud.
that workers' comp itself, that the government body wouldn't have a direct line to the police services because they're the ones having to pay out these big claims
Yeah.
if they go through, right?
100%.
And then, of course, the employer's premiums go up because they've got to cover for the number of claims that go through their company.
Yeah. Sounds like we need to go to Parliament.
It sounds ridiculous,
It does sound
really.
ridiculous. It is. But oddly enough, that's part of the thing. Even with background checks, when people come to us, there could be all sorts of fraud, and they've just never gotten in trouble for it. We've heard of handymans here and local to the area and all over Canada, and people say, this handyman screwed me over and I want to get information, find the address
It's a
so
big
I can
one.
go to a
It's a
civil
big
claim
one,
court.
yeah.
And you say, okay, no problem. And I know at least 5 other people had this happen. Okay, no problem. We run a background check? Nothing. But those people just didn't go forward with anything, right? They're like, it's not worth it. The guy's a douchebag. He's not going to pay, whatever
And
the
the
issue
amount
is.
might be small, and then you have to, even if you wanted to go to small claims court,
Yep.
by the time you did everything, they just write it off as a,
Yep.
live and learn, a
Yeah.
lesson learned.
Well, that's just it, right? Or it causes stress in the family, stress in marriages because, I told you, to the husband, I didn't want you to hire that guy and I felt he was weird. And
Well, you said he
whatever.
was okay after when I
Well-
started to have suspicions. Don't you remember? No, I don't remember that.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's tricky, but yeah, there's a lot of things.
And
that
there's a
we
lot of
can
those
do.
guys out there.
Well, 100%. We can do the deepest dive. That doesn't mean we're not going to find something. That just means that person potentially hasn't gotten caught.
I love when you see the social media videos of all the hack handyman jobs.
Oh,
and they're
totally.
like, done, here
Yeah,
you go.
yeah. It's sad though, because people
Well-
don't know, right? You think you're hiring somebody, and that's another thing with just online tools nowadays. You can go on any credible little handyman guy's website and take his pictures. Let's say the guy's in Vancouver, and then you're posting here in Toronto saying, "Oh yeah, look at me and all
Great
these
job
jobs I
done."
did." And meanwhile, that's somebody's pictures from somewhere else, right? So
It's like people used to take the photos in the from the frames and put it on their desk so they looked like they had a family.
Right.
And they just superimpose
Yeah.
their faces
Like, your kids are so
on
cute.
there.
Yeah.
Right? Look at my family. I'm a responsible
Respectable.
Right.
individual.
Yeah.
That used to happen.
Yeah.
It did in the old days. Pasted it on. We didn't have the technology we have today.
Different time.
But
Yeah, Photoshop
a lot of
AI.
people were still creative. That
Yeah.
was always there. And I wanted to ask you something, Marisa, about criminal records. And what the heck was I going to ask you now? It slipped my mind.
I actually
Something
have
you
a
were
question
saying.
while
Yes,
you think of that.
yes.
So we had a situation where we were doing a background check on somebody that allegedly around 20 years ago was a peeping Tom. And peeping Tom charges, I don't think were really a thing at the time because the technology hadn't really come forward yet. So I don't think there was like a peeping Tom, section 105, kind of situation. So I don't know what the individual might have been charged with, but apparently later got a pardon and yet had effectively done a renovation to a bathroom and placed cameras in a bathroom and somewhere else in the residence. And this person knew about it, verified from someone who was, part of the, I guess, arresting situation at the time. And they just wanted proof of it. And yet, how did that individual get a pardon out of something like that? Is it because there was no peeping Tom charge back then? Like, how would you effectively do that? They were asking us and we're like, I don't
From
know.
a legal standpoint, there were always laws against that.
Yeah.
So there would be criminal charges laid.
Okay.
But you can answer now about having that pardoned and removed.
Well, prior to the current legislation, any sex-related offense was still pardonable if eligibility had been met.
Which is what?
3 years for a summary conviction,
What?
meaning less serious, 5 years
Wow.
for an indictable conviction, and that all of those offenses typically are tried summarily, meaning less serious. So 3 years. 3 years after the punishment, where they probably got a year probation.
Wow, crazy.
I'm trying to
And
think of
you can't offend during that time period. It's not just you have to wait 3 years.
That seems crazy to
You
me,
have
though.
to
Somebody
wait
could
time
literally
and not reoffend.
Sexually assault somebody though, and that could get pardoned. Like that seems wild.
Oh, even murders can be pardoned.
Oh my gosh.
Well, not first or second degree because they're on lifetime parole, but manslaughter,
Oh wow.
which is an accident. And so somebody
Okay, I get it if it's an accident.
Well,
That's maybe one
the
thing.
death was unintentional, but to be convicted, you were most likely, the scenario is people are in a fight and then someone falls and hits their head. It's not like an accident,
Right,
like I'm
right.
walking here in the studio and I slip. That's
Right.
just an accident.
Right, sure.
Manslaughter has to come from somebody's actions, some assault against another person in one way or another. Could even be with a vehicle.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah, true.
years ago, certain offenses like prostitution weren't always fingerprinted.
Oh, okay.
And
Soliciting.
so
Yeah,
the
that's
record
right.
wouldn't be forwarded up to the federal level,
Oh, okay.
CPIC.
Yep.
And you could leave sleeping dogs lie, we would call it, and not move forward
Right.
with a pardon. It would be at the local level only.
People exposing themselves.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Sure.
Sometimes those were not fingerprinted. The person might have been arrested, and you'd have a local police record,
Right.
but they would not have been fingerprinted or photographed necessarily. I mean, this could apply to many charges.
Sure,
It wasn't just these charges. So sometimes they are not at the federal level, and they were not convicted, and they just kind of sit there. But it wouldn't be
But
something.
this person that you're speaking of, they met eligibility requirements. They moved through the pardon process.
Sure.
And rubber stamp was given.
Yeah, that's
And
wild.
well, here's the point. If we look at our population and say approximately 12% of our adult population has a criminal record at some point, and because we keep getting them removed in one way or another, with Marisa's good work, for example, who knows? We would have 20%, 25% of
Right.
eligible employees, eligible workers, right now being punished for their whole life for committing a crime at
Right.
some point in their life.
Right.
Now, is the crime such that we think it's so heinous that they should never be allowed to have it removed,
Right.
or maybe never let them out of jail because we just think it's so horrible? What they did was just absolutely devastating, and we don't want to even see them in society.
Right.
But most things are not like that.
Right, right.
So if I shoplifted a lipstick, I stole a lipstick when I was 18 years old from Shoppers, and now I can't get a job because every time I go to get a job, there's a theft charge on my
Right.
record. What am I doing? How can I survive? I either have to get on social services, so now I'm being paid by the
Sure,
government, or I'm working under the table, not paying my taxes. That also doesn't benefit everybody, right? Or I'm committing a crime because obviously that's what the law says. So
Yeah.
so
Hope.
no. So now
Yeah.
we have hope. You can remove that, start fresh,
And people
and go
change,
forward.
right?
And in
So
situations like
something-
that, a lipstick stolen for sure.
Yeah, I'm
when you're
just
young
giving
and
you one
dumb. Yeah.
example.
No, for
But
sure.
even your example, it just sparked my attention to a former client with an offense similar in nature. By the time he was working with us, he was in his 60s, and this happened I think he was 19 at the time. So people change over time. The incident, on paper looks really bad. When you hear someone's story, it often is very different than what it shows up.
What had he done?
He recognized, well, he was charged with a sexual assault type offense. It happened at a park. A girl was riding her bike by. He took interest, and he recognizes how inappropriate now, but his goal was to chat her up, and he did get her to stop and talk to her. But instead of continuing a conversation, I think he reached out and grabbed her breast. Completely inappropriate.
Oh my God.
But he was young and dumb.
Oh
How to
yeah.
deck
And
him.
this offense
Yes,
happened.
and that happens a lot too.
Yeah.
He's 19 years old. This offense happens. He carries on with his life. He built a business, successful guy, married, had a couple kids, involved in his community. And then, approaching retirement, recognized this is going to interfere with travel. And so that's at the point he came to us and was like, very embarrassed to have to explain this story.
Well, because it
For
looks
sure.
when you see sexual assault can cover anything,
Right.
any from the most horrific situations to the smallest situations.
Right.
And
the
and
term
so it's
rape was removed from the criminal code. So now some guy grabbing your ass in a bar
Right.
and some predator hunting you down and attacking you,
beating
is
you and
called
raping
the
you.
exact same thing.
It's
So crazy.
It is so crazy because it doesn't show the severity of things
Yeah.
at all.
It diminishes the victim.
It
by
can.
just being this broad.
It can,
well,
yes.
it falls under this thing. So whether your breast got groped or you were, physically raped, like that's, either one, there's, you're being assaulted. But yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, one is seen so much worse, and it doesn't need to be, let's say, for the person's whole life, and the other one
Yeah.
is horrific, and it's downplayed
Yeah.
with using the same language. I didn't really agree with that. I know why they did it. The intention of it was good. The intention was to say you can't just go around touching other people
Yeah.
without their consent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I
100%.
think that was why they wanted to have a charge that was
covered that.
and it was sexual, so it's sexual, it's an assault, and sexual things are assaults. So let's get that clear. This isn't acceptable. And I think there was a time period where it wasn't made so aware. People weren't so aware that this was inappropriate. If you watch old movies, some guy grabs a girl and plants a kiss on her, and it's all okay. Well, no, that's not really okay unless the person's agreeing, right?
Right.
So that was why the change happened. But I know in one of my situations where someone had an assault with a weapon. Now, you don't want to hire a person like that when you
Sure.
first see
Yeah.
that situation. He's in a seminar. This one woman won't stop talking. He asked her, please, shh, shh, shh. She won't stop.
Right.
So he was eating jelly beans. So he just sort of threw one at her to say, stop. So that was the weapon.
Oh,
The
wow.
weapon was
Yeah,
a jelly,
it's a jelly bean.
Now, how many people
Painful.
have been in a movie
Right,
theater
yeah.
and either been the victim
Thrown
of a popcorn
popcorn.
toss or thrown the popcorn themselves?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're at. So, but you look at it and it says assault with a weapon. I mean,
Sure, yeah,
that's a
that
red
can-
flag. So you need to
absolutely.
get those things erased.
Yeah. No, in certain situations, absolutely.
Yeah, and a lot of times these are one-off things.
Yep.
A lot of the records or something that you'll see in a background check might look worse than it really is, or actually be worse than it seems at the
Yeah, for
beginning.
sure.
Probably more that way, right?
Yeah.
When you delve deep, do you find more dirt rather than less dirt?
Yeah. I mean, well, especially certain characters, right? You can certainly find some pretty interesting things as you dive, and then you learn about their family and extensions and the people that they're spending time with. Like, yeah, you can definitely learn quite a lot, and I guess not much surprises us anymore, but
So our takeaway today, hopefully we've covered a lot.
Yeah,
I think so. I think our takeaway today is, as an employer, you are allowed to do background checks on potential employees, current employees that you might want to promote.
With written consent.
You can do background checks without
Yeah, you can do it
without written consent, but you can't do certain checks, like you can't do criminal record checks without written consent, or certain credit checks without written consent.
with consent credit checks. We
Right.
can do a background check, criminal history, arrest records, all that without consent.
Right, because that's of public record. But the point is, you should do these checks. You should ask for the individual's consent, especially if they're in a responsible position.
Absolutely.
And then they have the opportunity to refute anything you find or show, hey, that's not me in that criminal record check, because look, I went and did my fingerprints, and that John Doe is not me. I'm a different John Doe. You can also exonerate yourself from time to time. But the point is, as an employer, you should do these checks. And as a potential employee, if you do have a criminal record, you should get that removed.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining me here today.
Yeah,
That
thanks
was
for having
great.
us. That was awesome.
great.
Yeah, thanks for having us.